The notice from my landlord had been as unwelcome as a sudden cold front in July. Rent increase effective next month. My carefully balanced budget, a testament to years of meticulous planning, immediately listed to one side, threatening to capsize entirely. I stared at the numbers on my spreadsheet, the red ink mocking my predicament. Living alone in my quiet, perfectly ordered two-bedroom apartment had been a cherished luxury, a sanctuary I'd meticulously crafted over years. Now it felt less like a haven and more like an anchor dragging me under. The solution, stark and unavoidable, was a roommate. The very word sent a shiver down my spine. Not of fear, but of profound discomfort. My life thrived on predictability, on the quiet rhythm of my own company. The thought of another person's habits, their quirks, their very presence intruding upon my carefully cultivated peace felt like an invasion. But the alternative, packing up my life and moving to a smaller, less desirable space, was equally unappealing. This apartment, though too large for my current means, held echoes of a past I was still quietly processing, a past that made the idea of starting over somewhere new feel impossibly heavy. So, with a deep sigh that seemed to carry the weight of my reluctance, I posted an ad. The parade of potential candidates was a blur of awkward small talk and fleeting impressions, each one confirming my deepest reservations. Until Sarah. She arrived 15 minutes late, a whirlwind of apologies and genuine charm. Her dark, curly hair a wild halo around her head. It was a mass of rich, deep brown that seemed to catch the light in 1,000 different ways, framing a face that was both striking and incredibly open. Her eyes, a vibrant shade of hazel, sparkled with an almost childlike enthusiasm, and her smile was wide and uninhibited, revealing a confidence that was both alluring and, to my reserved nature, a little intimidating. She wore a paint-splattered denim jacket over a bright yellow shirt, an outfit that spoke of spontaneity and a disregard for convention. She carried a large, overflowing tote bag, its contents threatening to spill at any moment. "So sorry," she exclaimed, her voice bright and a little breathless, her hand immediately outstretched. "Got caught up with something amazing. You must be Ruby." I remember thinking even then that she was entirely too much, too vibrant, too present. My own practical, understated black jeans and cream sweater suddenly felt incredibly drab next to her riot of color and energy. She moved through my apartment with easy grace, touching a bookshelf here, peering out a window there, her curiosity boundless. I watched her, a silent observer taking in every detail, every uninhibited gesture. There was a lightness to her, a sense of being entirely comfortable in her own skin, that stood in stark contrast to my own carefully maintained composure. She didn't just look at the spare room, she imagined herself in it. "Oh, this corner would be perfect for my easel," she said, her eyes lighting up. "And I could put my vintage records right here." My carefully neutral space, designed for quiet contemplation, was already being mentally redecorated with a painter's palette and vinyl albums. A faint alarm bell began to ring in my mind. "It's a good size," I managed, my voice a little stiffer than I intended. Sarah, however, didn't seem to notice my reserved demeanor. She turned to me, her bright eyes assessing. "So, Ruby," she paused, tilting her head slightly. "What do you do?" I explained my work in publishing, the long hours, the quiet dedication. She listened, nodded, but her gaze seemed to drift already to the view outside the window. It felt like she was absorbing the general gist rather than the specifics, a quick scan rather than a deep dive. My inner dialogue immediately flagged this as a potential source of friction. I valued precision, detail. Sarah, it seemed, was more about the broad strokes. When she said, "I think I'd love to take it," with that same wide, genuine smile, I felt a strange mix of relief and dread. Relief because the search was over, dread because I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that my quiet, ordered life was about to become anything but. This was a necessity, not a choice, and the distinction weighed heavily on me. I nodded, a faint, almost imperceptible quiver in my hands. This was it. My world, as I knew it, was about to collide with hers. And I had a feeling it was going to be anything but quiet. The first week was a testament to the undeniable truth that Sarah and I were two entirely different species. My morning routine, a meticulously choreographed ballet of silent coffee brewing, newspaper reading, and calm preparation, was instantly shattered. Sarah, it turned out, was not a morning person in the traditional sense, but she was definitely a noisy one. The clanging of pots and pans from the kitchen, the exuberant humming of a forgotten pop song, the scent of burnt toast, a recurring motif, these became the new soundtrack to my once serene mornings. I'd sit at the kitchen table, nursing my perfectly brewed coffee, watching her whirlwind through the space. She'd leave a trail of crumbs on the counter, a half-empty mug on the table, and her art supplies, vibrant tubes of paint and brushes, often took over a corner of the living room, a riot of color that clashed with my carefully chosen muted tones. "Oh, did I leave that there?" she'd ask, genuine surprise in her voice, when I'd politely point out a misplaced item. Oops. My bad. But the oops rarely translated into lasting change. My inner monologue, once a calm stream of thoughts, now frequently devolved into a litany of exasperated observations. Another wet towel on the bathroom floor. Is that my milk she just used without asking? Did she really leave the front door unlocked? One evening, after a particularly draining day at work, I walked into the apartment expecting quiet, only to be hit by the booming bass of a forgotten music genre. Sarah wasn't home, but her vintage record player, which she'd proudly displayed, was blasting away. The vibrations hummed through the floorboards. I stood there for a moment, my hand still on the doorknob, feeling a surge of irritation warm my face. I walked to her room, the sound growing louder, and cautiously turned the volume dial down, then off. Later, when she finally returned, her cheeks flushed, I assumed, from a social gathering, she noticed the silence. "Oh, my music," she exclaimed, a small frown creasing her brow. "Did you turn it off, Ruby?" "Yes," I replied, my voice calm, almost detached, despite the tightness in my chest. It was quite loud. "I've had a long day." She looked at me, her hazel eyes wide, then a slow smile spread across her face. "Right, sorry. Guess I forgot it was on. Sometimes I just get lost in things." There was no malice in her tone, only a genuine, if somewhat unhelpful, acknowledgement. But the real breaking point came a few days later. I had a deadline looming, pages to edit, and an important video call scheduled. My workspace, a small desk tucked into a corner of the living room, was my temporary sanctuary. I had explicitly requested quiet during certain hours, a request Sarah had agreed to with a cheerful nod. Mid-call, though, with my editor on screen, Sarah decided it was the perfect time to rearrange her record collection. The cheerful, rhythmic thud-thud-thud of records being stacked, interspersed with snippets of off-key singing, seeped through the thin walls. My editor, a formidable woman named Ms. Albright, raised an eyebrow. "Is everything all right there, Ruby?" I mumbled an apology, my face burning, and tried to focus on the conversation, but the distraction was impossible to ignore. As soon as the call ended, I walked directly to Sarah's room. She was humming, a small stack of vinyl in her arms, completely oblivious. Her dark hair was tied up in a messy bun, and a smudge of what looked like blue paint adorned her cheek. "Sarah," I began, my voice low but firm, an edge of frustration underlying each word. "We discussed this. I need quiet during my work hours. I was on an important call." She turned, her movements halting. Her smile faltered, replaced by a look of genuine surprise, then a flicker of something I couldn't quite place. Perhaps defensiveness, perhaps confusion. "Oh, Ruby, I really didn't think it was that loud. I was just organizing." It was, I insisted, my words clipped. It was very loud. And distracting. My work is important. I watched her, my eyes fixed on hers, trying to convey the gravity of my annoyance without yelling, something that felt entirely out of character for me. Sarah put the records down slowly. "Look, I get it," she said, though her tone suggested she didn't quite. "I'll try to be more mindful." There was a slight edge to her voice now, a faint hardening around her expressive eyes. I simply nodded, a tight knot forming in my stomach. The silence that followed was thick with unspoken tension, a chasm that had suddenly opened between us. As I retreated to my room, feeling a profound sense of unease, I questioned the wisdom of my decision. My sanctuary was gone, replaced by a constant, low-level hum of discord. This was far more challenging than I had anticipated. I longed for the uncomplicated solitude of my previous life, a past that suddenly felt 1,000 miles away. Despite the domestic chaos and our clashing routines, something unexpected began to shift. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, like the slow, quiet melting of ice. It began with an incident, small on its own, but significant in its impact. I had forgotten my wallet at home one morning, a rare lapse in my otherwise meticulous organizational habits. I was already at the bus stop, mentally ticking through my day, when the realization hit. A wave of exasperation washed over me. I considered rushing back, but knew I'd miss an important meeting. Just as I was weighing my options, a breathless Sarah appeared, jogging up the street, my wallet clutched in her hand. "Ruby, you left this on the kitchen counter," she panted, her dark, curly hair bouncing with her efforts, genuine concern etched on her face. Her hazel eyes, usually sparkling with mischief, were earnest. Saw it just as I was heading out. I took it from her, a surprised warmth spreading through me.
"Thank you, Sarah."
I didn't even realize. "No problem," she said, giving me a quick, reassuring smile before hurrying off in her own direction. It was a small gesture, but it disarmed me. It chipped away at the solid wall of irritation I had been building. She didn't just bring chaos. Sometimes, she brought unexpected thoughtfulness. Then came the shared burden. One evening, after a particularly silent dinner, the apartment's ancient refrigerator started making an ominous rattling sound. We both stood there, looking at it, then at each other. The repair would be expensive, a fact that weighed heavily on both of us, given our tight budgets. "Well," Sarah said, a wry smile playing on her lips, "looks like we're in this together." I found myself nodding, a small, involuntary smile escaping. "Looks that way." In that moment, the financial stress, usually a solitary weight, felt briefly shared. And with that sharing came a fleeting sense of solidarity. But what truly sparked my reluctant curiosity was watching Sarah immersed in her art. I'd often find her in the living room, surrounded by canvases, paints, and brushes, entirely lost in her work. Her usual vibrant energy would settle into a fierce, quiet focus. Her dark hair would fall over her face as she leaned in close, her brow furrowed in concentration, a stray smudge of paint often on her cheek or forehead. In those moments, her expressive features softened, her usually open eyes narrowing with intense contemplation. She'd sometimes hum softly a low, tuneless melody, entirely absorbed. Watching her, I saw a different Sarah, not the chaotic roommate, but an artist deeply connected to her craft. The genuine passion radiating from her was undeniable, almost magnetic. It was a raw, authentic energy that transcended the surface annoyances. I'd find myself pausing in the doorway, watching her for a few moments longer than necessary, a strange, unfamiliar warmth unfurling in my chest. My internal narrative, once dominated by complaints, began to shift. The irritation still flickered, but now it was mixed with grudging respect, quiet fascination. There was more to Sarah than met the eye, I realized, more than just surface chaos. And that realization, uncomfortable as it was, sparked a growing, unsettling curiosity about the person behind the vibrancy. It was a softening, a tiny, almost imperceptible softening, of the walls I'd so carefully built around myself. The apartment began to settle into a new, albeit fragile, rhythm. Our earlier clashes, especially the volume incident, had led to awkward but necessary compromises. We'd agreed on quiet hours for my work, and in return, I'd learned to tolerate Sarah's occasional bursts of musical inspiration at a significantly reduced decibel. I even caught myself humming along to some of her more melodic tunes, though I never admitted aloud. These tentative steps toward coexistence slowly paved the way for something like camaraderie. There were brief, unplanned moments of shared humor, the time we both reached for the last carton of oat milk, our hands brushing, only to burst into laughter at the sheer predictability of it. Or the comfortable silence that sometimes settled between us while we read, Sarah with a vibrant, dog-eared paperback, me with a literary journal, only the turning of pages and the fridge's soft hum breaking the quiet. These moments, fleeting as they were, started to feel less like accidents and more like the first threads of connection. My thoughts, though, still drifted off into the past, a quiet, lingering ache that explained my guarded nature. A few years prior, a significant betrayal had left me with a deep aversion to unpredictability and a fierce need for control. That's why Sarah's spontaneous spirit, her seemingly boundless trust in the world, had initially jarred me so much. I'd built thick, impenetrable walls to protect myself from that kind of hurt again. Predictability had become my shield, order my comfort. Yet, despite these lingering shadows, I found myself drawn more and more to Sarah's energy. Her laughter, free and unrestrained, was a particular fascination. It wasn't just a sound. It was an event, lighting up her entire face, crinkling the corners of her hazel eyes, making her dark, curly hair seem to buzz with joy. It stood in stark contrast to my own carefully controlled composure, my polite, almost silent chuckles. I'd often catch myself watching her, completely absorbed, a quiet observer of her effortless happiness. There was a genuine warmth to her, a generosity that seeped into even the most mundane interactions. She'd offer me a piece of toast, burnt slightly less than usual, or share a story about a ridiculous client at her graphic design job, her eyes sparkling with amusement. And I, in turn, found myself listening, truly listening, something I hadn't done with such focus in a long time. My inner conflict hummed constantly. On one hand, I cherished the quiet, the order, the protective distance I kept. On the other, this growing warmth toward Sarah, this unexpected pull, was both comforting and unsettling. It challenged my carefully built emotional boundaries, forcing me to confront the possibility that my rigid system might be keeping me from something valuable. It was a precarious truce, not just between us, but within myself, as the quiet observer in me began to see Sarah not just as a roommate, but as a person, in full, vibrant color. The uneasy truce slowly, almost imperceptibly, turned into genuine friendship. Our interactions moved beyond the logistics of shared living. One rainy Saturday, trapped indoors, Sarah suggested we visit the local thrift store, knowing my love for vintage books. I hesitated, then agreed. It was outside our apartment that I saw another side of her. She wasn't just energetic, she was genuinely curious about the world, about people. She chatted with the store owner, haggled playfully, and found a ridiculous, oversized sweater she declared perfect for painting. I, meanwhile, found a first edition I'd been searching for months to find. The afternoon was filled with light conversation and an unexpected ease. We ended up sharing lukewarm coffee at a small cafe, talking about books and art, the dialogue flowing without effort. I watched the way her dark, curly hair framed her face as she laughed, a genuine, open sound that warmed something deep inside me. Our talks evolved beyond small talk to more personal topics. Cautiously, we began to share snippets of our dreams and fears. I found myself telling her, in vague terms, about the past emotional disappointment that had made me so wary of getting close to people. Sarah listened intently, her hazel eyes soft, no judgment in her gaze. She, in turn, spoke of her aspirations as an artist, the financial struggles, the moments of doubt that haunted her despite her outward optimism. She talked about how colors could stir emotions, and I realized how deeply she felt things, how fully she connected to the world around her. One particularly hard day, I received a harsh rejection from a publisher. A manuscript I'd poured months into was dismissed with a short, impersonal email. I retreated to my room, feeling the familiar sting of disappointment and a heavy sense of inadequacy. I didn't cry easily, but a dull ache settled behind my eyes. Later that evening, Sarah knocked softly on my door. "Ruby, you okay? Didn't see you much today." I opened the door a crack. "Just a bad day," I mumbled, avoiding her gaze. She didn't push. Instead, she simply said, "I made extra tea. It's chamomile. And there's leftover spaghetti, if you're hungry." There was quiet understanding in her tone, acceptance of my need for space, paired with an offer of comfort. I noticed the subtle tilt of her head, the gentle way she held the teacup, radiating a warmth that seeped past my defenses. It was a gesture that moved beyond our initial friction, a pure, unselfish act of care. I found myself accepting the tea, joining her silently in the living room. We sat in comfortable quiet, only the soft clink of our mugs breaking the stillness. In that moment, the weight of the rejection felt lighter, eased by the simple presence of someone who understood without needing details. My internal conflict was still there, a faint echo, but it was overshadowed by growing warmth toward Sarah. This feeling, a mix of affection and respect, was both comforting and unsettling. It challenged my emotional boundaries, forcing me to confront the possibility that the walls I'd built for protection might also be keeping me from something deeply good. The shifting ground of our relationship was creating a landscape I hadn't expected, one where friendship, real and deep, was taking root. The atmosphere in our apartment had grown thick with unspoken emotion, like a summer storm gathering on the horizon. The lines we'd drawn, first as strangers, then as wary roommates, then as friends, were now gone entirely. The air between us crackled with a new kind of tension, one that was undeniably alluring. One evening, after a brutal week for both of us, I was dealing with a tough editorial review, Sarah with a demanding art commission. We decided on a low-key night in. We ordered pizza, put on a mellow playlist, and curled up on opposite ends of the sofa, sharing small bits about our days. Sarah's dark, curly hair, usually tied up, fell loose around her shoulders, framing her face softly as she spoke. I found myself captivated by the way her features lit up when she talked, the subtle shifts in her expression as she shared stories. As the evening wore on, the conversation lightened, punctuated by comfortable silences. Sarah started recounting a hilarious incident with a finicky client. Her usual playful banter had a new, quiet edge. She leaned forward, elbows on her knees, her hazel eyes sparkling as she described the client's absurd demands. She joked about my meticulousness, but there was a twinkle in her eye, less a tease, more a quiet invitation. It wasn't overt flirting, not really, but it was a knowing glance, a pause and eye contact that lasted a beat too long, a shared smile that hung in the air. Then the topic shifted. I don't remember how, but we started talking about fear. Uncharacteristically, I found myself admitting a deep-seated fear of failure, of not being enough, a fear rooted in the past hurts that had made me so guarded. My voice was softer than usual, a little unsteady. It was a vulnerability I rarely showed, if ever. Sarah listened, her expression serious, her gaze steady. She didn't offer empty platitudes. Instead, she said quietly, "I get it, Ruby. Sometimes I feel like I'm always chasing something, always just out of reach. It's terrifying putting yourself out there, isn't it?" Her voice was low, empathetic, a shared recognition of that universal fear of falling short, of being seen as less than. In that moment, her outward optimism faded, revealing a hidden layer of vulnerability, a quiet hope that resonated deeply with my own. A comfortable silence settled again, but this time it was different. Intimate, filled with unspoken understanding. We looked at each other, and suddenly Sarah laughed, a genuine, unrestrained sound, unrelated to our serious talk. Maybe it was a memory or a random thought. It was full-bodied, making her shoulders shake, her dark hair a wild frame around her glowing face. And then, surprisingly, I laughed too. Not my usual polite chuckle, but a real, unguarded sound that bubbled up from deep inside, something I rarely let myself do. It felt freeing, a pure, heartfelt release. Our laughter mixed, filling the apartment with a sound that felt entirely new, entirely ours. In that moment, the last of my carefully built emotional barriers seemed to crumble. The shared vulnerability, the quiet teasing, this unrestrained laughter, they'd solidified our bond in a way nothing else had. A spark had ignited, bright and undeniable, lighting a path I hadn't dared to imagine. The spark, once lit, burned with quiet intensity, creating a tension that hummed beneath the surface of our days. Every glance across the room, every shared silence, held an unspoken understanding, a question hanging in the air between us. The apartment, once a neutral space, then a place of gentle clashes, now felt like a closed room, vibrating with a delicate, unfamiliar energy. I was acutely aware of Sarah's presence, the way her arm might brush mine when she reached for a mug, the subtle shift in the air when she entered a room. Each small moment sent a jolt through me, a mix of excitement and a sharp, uneasy vulnerability. My mind was a constant buzz, processing these new feelings, these undeniable emotions that pulsed beneath my calm exterior. I replayed conversations, analyzed glances, tried to read meaning in her casual gestures. But with this intensity came a familiar, instinctive reaction: fear. The walls I'd spent years rebuilding after past hurts started to go up again, brick by brick. My heart, which had just begun to open, now felt a fresh twinge of worry. The thought of being vulnerable, of letting someone in fully, brought a deep sense of panic. What if this, too, ended in disappointment? What if I'd misread everything? What if I got hurt again? I started to pull back, subtly at first. My conversations grew shorter, my laughs less free. I spent more time in my room, making excuses to be alone, needing space to sort through the overwhelming rush of emotions Sarah stirred in me. I needed to breathe, to make sense of things, to regain some control over my chaotic inner world. It was an automatic defense, a retreat to the familiar safety of my own company. Sarah, with her sharp eye for detail, didn't miss the shift. I'd catch her looking at me, a thoughtful frown creasing her brow, her usually open face holding a hint of confusion, even sadness. Her hazel eyes, which had felt so warm lately, now seemed to carry a quiet question. This made my inner conflict worse. Seeing her quiet hurt, her confusion, twisted something in my gut. I wanted to explain, to tell her it wasn't her, but me, my fear, my past, but the words stuck in my throat, tangled in the knots of my self-protection. The unspoken feelings hung heavy between us, making the air feel thick. One evening, after a strained silence at dinner, Sarah finally spoke, her voice softer than usual. "Ruby," she said, her gaze steady, "is everything okay? You seem distant." I hesitated, fumbling for a harmless answer. "Just a lot on my mind with work," I lied, the words feeling thin. "Deadlines, you know." She nodded slowly, her expression not quite convinced. "Right," she said, but her eyes held a deeper understanding, a quiet challenge to my weak excuse. She didn't push, but the air was heavy with the things we weren't saying. We danced around our feelings, both avoiding direct words, leaving a sense of unmet longing and frustration. I wanted to reach out, to close the distance I'd created, but a stubborn, primal fear kept me frozen. The pull between us was undeniable, but my fear of letting go was just as strong, a frustrating, confusing dance of moving closer and pulling away. The unspoken tension between Sarah and me had built to a breaking point, a tight string ready to snap with unaddressed emotion. My retreat had created distance, but it hadn't put out the fire. If anything, it had made the longing sharper, a dull ache under my ribs. I was caught between the fierce need to protect myself and an overwhelming desire for the connection Sarah offered. The push we needed came not from our inner struggle, but from an outside blow. Sarah got news of a sudden, brutal cut to her freelance work, 3 major clients pulling out overnight. It wasn't just a financial hit. It felt like a blow to her artistic dreams. I found her that evening, not humming or painting, but sitting on the living room rug, surrounded by scattered papers, her face pale, her usual energy completely gone. Her dark, curly hair lay flat, a stark contrast to its usual bounce. "Sarah?" I asked, my voice quiet, the sight of her so vulnerable twisting my heart. She looked up, her hazel eyes clouded with unshed tears, raw pain etched on her face. It's all gone, Ruby. Most of my contracts. I don't know what I'm going to do." Her voice cracked, and a single tear slid down her cheek. In that moment, all my carefully built walls, all my fear of vulnerability, vanished. There was no room for self-protection, only a strong, instinctive need to comfort her. I walked over, no second thoughts, and sat down beside her on the rug. "Oh, Sarah," I murmured, my hand reaching out, hovering for a moment, then resting gently on her shoulder. The warmth of her through her shirt was immediate, grounding. "I am so sorry. That's terrible." She leaned into the touch slightly, a small, choked sound escaping her. I could feel her shoulders shake. My heart ached for her, for the crushing weight of her disappointment. I didn't try to fix it or offer empty reassurances. I just sat there, a quiet anchor in her storm. Minutes stretched into a quiet, shared stretch of time. I felt her breathing steady under my hand. She eventually looked up, her eyes still wet, but with a flicker of gratitude. Our gazes met, and in that long, held look, everything unspoken, months of watching each other, initial friction, growing affection, the push and pull of fear and longing, came together. Words felt useless. My hand moved from her shoulder, slowly, tentatively, to rest on her cheek. She leaned into the touch, her eyes closing for a brief moment. My heart was pounding, a loud drumbeat in my chest. Then, almost without thinking, I leaned in. It was a hesitant, gentle brush of lips, tentative, exploratory, filled with all the unspoken emotions that had built between us. Soft, a quiet sharing of breath, a culmination of months of quiet longing. My mind was a swirl of warmth and the overwhelming feeling of finally letting go, of giving in to something inevitable and deeply right. It was awkward in its newness, a little clumsy, but incredibly meaningful, a soft press that said more than words ever could. When our lips parted, it was only by a whisper. We stayed close, our foreheads almost touching, our breaths mixing in the quiet apartment. No words were needed, only the stunned silence, the shared breathing, a mix of deep relief, quiet wonder, and nervous, excited anticipation of what this fragile, beautiful moment meant for our future. The silence stretched, filled with the echo of that first, tentative kiss, a promise waiting to be realized. The apartment, once a place of routine and quiet conflict, now felt different, imbued with the soft, lingering memory of our kiss. The air, which had hummed with unspoken tension, now resonated with a fragile new warmth, a sense of delicate possibility. We moved through our shared space with a mix of excitement and caution, each casual glance, each shared smile, holding new, deep meaning. It was like walking on fresh ice, exhilarating, but with a constant awareness of its fragility. The next morning, the silence at breakfast wasn't strained. It was heavy with unspoken feelings. Sarah poured us both coffee, her movements a little softer than usual. She caught my eye, a hesitant smile on her lips, a blush rising on her cheeks. I felt my own face warm in response. The directness of her gaze was both disarming and deeply reassuring. Finally, I cleared my throat, the sound loud in the quiet kitchen. "Sarah," I began, my voice a little unsteady, "about last night." She met my gaze directly, her hazel eyes soft. "Ruby," she whispered, her voice barely audible. I don't regret it." A wave of relief washed over me. "Neither do I admitted, the words feeling freeing. This was the conversation we'd both avoided for so long. "But I need to be honest." I'm not good at this, relationships, I mean. I've been hurt before, and I've built a lot of walls. The words tumbled out, raw and vulnerable, a sign of the trust one was starting to place in her. She reached across the table, her hand gently covering mine. I know, she said, her voice filled with gentle understanding. I've seen your walls, Ruby, and I've seen glimpses of what's behind them. We don't have to be good at this right away. We can figure it out. Together. Her touch was warm, comforting, a silent promise of patience and acceptance. That first, awkward but honest conversation opened the floodgates. We started the slow, delicate work of sharing our deeper fears, hopes, and past hurts. I found myself opening up to Sarah in ways I never thought possible, telling her about the past betrayal, the lingering doubts about my own worth, the reasons I clung so tightly to order and predictability. Sarah listened without interruption, her empathy a soft blanket around my exposed vulnerabilities. She, in turn, spoke of her own insecurities, the pressure to succeed as an artist, the quiet doubts that lingered beneath her bright exterior. Through these intimate talks, we built a deeper trust. Sarah's gentle acceptance, her lack of judgment, began to heal some of my old wounds. She showed me, with her patient listening and quiet reassurance, that vulnerability didn't have to lead to pain. It could be a path to strength, to closer connection. I found myself breathing easier, my shoulders less tense. The heavy weight of past hurts, once a constant companion, started to lift, replaced by a faint sense of hope and possibility. We were navigating the unknown, hand in hand, slowly, carefully, building something fragile and beautiful together. With the initial awkwardness and vulnerability behind us, Sarah and I settled into a comfortable rhythm, a gentle dance of two people finding a harmonious beat. The apartment, once a space of separate routines and occasional friction, now truly felt like a shared home, filled with the warmth of our growing connection. We sought out shared experiences, eager to build memories together. Quiet evenings at home turned into movie nights where we debated plot twists, or cooking sessions where Sarah's spontaneous experiments blended surprisingly well with my precise measurements. We explored new places too. Art galleries where Sarah pointed out brushstrokes and color choices with excitement, and quiet bookstores where I lost myself in the scent of old paper, always aware of her quiet presence beside me. I noticed how Sarah's eyes lit up when we discovered something new together, a genuine delight that was contagious. One lingering domestic issue, the constant back and forth over kitchen cleanliness, became a sign of how far we'd come. Instead of sighs or short requests, we tackled it with new understanding and teamwork. We sat down, made a simple chart, split chores, and even laughed about our past clashes. It wasn't just about a clean kitchen. It was about learning to handle our differences with respect and affection. Our affection showed in small, tender ways. In public, where big displays felt too soon, we communicated closeness through quiet gestures, a hand brushing against the other's as we walked, a shared smile across a crowded room that held a private meaning. These small, fleeting moments, almost invisible to others, sent warmth through me, a gentle reminder of our deepening bond. It was a silent language, understood only by us, yet incredibly powerful in its reassurance. Then came the second kiss, different from the first, with more confidence and tenderness. We were curled up on the sofa one evening, after a long day, sharing stories. The light was dim, casting soft shadows around the room. Sarah had been talking about a new art technique she was trying, her voice low and melodic. I was listening, completely captivated by the way her dark, curly hair framed her animated face. She paused, her gaze meeting mine, and in her hazel eyes, I saw a reflection of the deep affection I felt. This kiss was unhurried, a quiet confirmation of our growing bond, the trust we'd built, the love starting to bloom between us. Soft, lingering, a gentle meeting of lips that spoke of established affection and emerging love. There was no awkwardness, no hesitation, only a deep sense of rightness, a shared moment of warmth and security that settled in my soul. It wasn't about the shock of a new feeling. It was about the quiet, comforting certainty of an affection that had taken root, deep and true. In that moment, surrounded by the apartment's soft hum, I knew, with a certainty that calmed all my remaining worries, that this was real, and it was beautiful. The rhythm of our life together had become a comfortable, deeply satisfying melody. We'd moved past the hesitant steps of new love, settling into a pattern where our individual needs weren't just tolerated, they were woven into the fabric of our shared life. The apartment, once a necessity, now felt undeniably like home, a sanctuary built not just of walls and furniture, but of shared laughter, quiet comfort, and unwavering support. I often found myself marveling at how easily we coexisted. Sarah's vibrant energy, once a mild annoyance, was now a cherished balance to my thoughtful calm. I noticed how Sarah, once prone to leaving things scattered, now made a conscious effort to keep our shared spaces tidy, a small but meaningful gesture of respect for my need for order. And I, in turn, embraced spontaneity, joining her on impromptu walks, letting her convince me to try new, adventurous recipes. My growth, under Sarah's gentle influence, was undeniable. The thick walls around my heart hadn't just been broken down, they'd been taken apart, brick by careful brick. I found a new openness in myself, a flexibility I never thought I had, and most importantly, the courage to see vulnerability not as weakness, but as a way to connect genuinely. I watched Sarah flourish too. Her anxieties about her art still lingered, but now she shared them openly, finding reassurance in my belief in her talent. Her natural optimism, once a lone flame, now burned brighter, fueled by our mutual support. We knew our journey wouldn't be without challenges. We talked briefly about potential hurdles, the quiet judgments, the societal expectations that might not align with our love. But our focus stayed on our commitment to each other, a quiet strength born from the depth of our bond. We didn't need to shout our love. It was written in the small moments of our daily lives, a silent, deep understanding. Our conversations turned more and more to shared dreams. They weren't detailed, rigid plans, just gentle imaginings of a life built together. A small studio for Sarah's art, a quiet space for my writing, maybe a shared garden someday. These weren't demands, but soft hopes, spoken in quiet tones, a sign of a deep, long-term commitment that filled me with peace and excitement. We were building a future, not just alone, but together, our paths. Now beautifully joined. The quiet observer in me, once so guarded, now found profound joy in simply being present in the unfolding story of us. I often look back, tracing the arc of our journey, from the shock of Sarah's vibrant presence in my quiet life to the deep intimacy we now share. It feels like a lifetime has passed in this apartment, a journey from uneasy strangers to reluctant roommates, then to cherished friends, and finally to lovers. The chaotic beginning, filled with my quiet frustration at her unruly energy, now feels like a distant, almost funny memory. My own transformation has been amazing, even to me. The guarded person who dreaded another's intrusion into her life is gone. Sarah's unwavering warmth, her persistent empathy, her patient understanding slowly wore down my defenses. She taught me that vulnerability isn't a flaw, but a bridge, that control isn't always needed, that true strength lies in letting yourself be seen fully. I learned to laugh more freely, to embrace the unexpected, to find beauty in imperfection, a lesson Sarah lives effortlessly. And Sarah has bloomed too. I've watched her quiet anxieties ease, replaced by greater confidence in her artistic voice. Her wild energy, once a little unruly, found an anchor in our shared life, letting her creativity flow with more purpose. We've both healed old wounds simply by being there for each other, by offering a safe place where honesty and acceptance matter most. Our journey isn't a finished story, it's an ongoing evolution. Love, I've learned, isn't a static thing. It's alive, needing care, understanding, and compromise. We still have differences, of course, the occasional stray paint smudge, my lingering need for organized shelves, but now we meet them with affection and playful negotiation, not quiet frustration. They're just part of the rich, messy tapestry of our shared life. As I look at Sarah now, her vibrant energy a comforting presence in our apartment, a deep sense of peace washes over me. She's painting, her dark, curly hair falling around her focused face, a smudge of cerulean blue on her cheek. She glances up, catches my eye, and gives that same wide, uninhibited smile that first disarmed me. This time, there's no dread, only deep, lasting joy. We stand together, stronger, closer, deeply in love, facing an open future. No grand declarations, no rigid plans, only the quiet, unshakable certainty that whatever comes next, we'll face it together. My transformation from a guarded person to someone capable of deep, open love is complete, yet still unfolding, day by day, in the warmth of our shared life. The horizon stretches before us, vast and full of possibility, and for the first time in a long time, I'm excited for every single step.